On today's Hot Sheet, I'm discussing housing vacancies, home ownership data for Q4 of last year, ATTOM's quarterly report on homeowner equity, where are underwater mortgages today, and the weekly unemployment report. Today is Thursday, February 5, 2026. I am Byron Lazine, and the Hot Sheet starts now. Live from Connecticut here in my Connecticut office and studio, here with Haley today. As always, it's a pleasure to be with you wherever you may be tuning in from, however you may be listening. Thanks to all of you who attended BAM Pro Bowl yesterday, completely action-packed. All the speakers were just phenomenal. You know, that was really special to spend that time with you guys, and appreciate everybody who attended. You know, very different conversations. We went deep yesterday on the Pro Bowl. You know, if you're a BAMX member and you missed it, it'll be uploaded in there and inside of school as a replay, obviously. But the amount of office parties that I saw happening and just some of the feedback yesterday was great. So thank you guys for that. We went deep on a whole bunch of conversations. You know, it's not like that, those conversations that are happening in New York right now, where you're just getting slinged clickbait from a stage to your face. It was real conversations, and it was a pleasure to have them with all of you guys. So, all right, let's get into the real conversation the last 24 hours, where we're at on updated housing data for you, the housing professional. First one that we have is a release here from the U.S. Census Bureau, just released this week. On vacancies and home ownerships for the fourth quarter of 25. They've closed out the data for Q4, and they've got as much data as they can. They didn't have October due to the shutdown that happened last year, the government shutdown, but the fourth quarter estimates, therefore, based on only data from November and December. But it gives us a look at kind of where we're at on these vacancy rates. So let's take a look at what they came up with here. Rental vacancy rate comes in for Q4 at 7.2%, and the homeowner vacancy rate is at 1.2%. Home ownership comes in at 65.7%. All right, so where do those sit, you know, kind of historically? The rental vacancy rate, it is higher than we've seen, obviously, in the last handful of years. I think more important is to compare it to 2019, and it is above 2019 levels by all accounts. Every quarter in 2019 to you know, the quarter four level in 25 sits above that. It's generally in line with, you know, post recovery, call it 14 to 19, that 5-year span. It's generally in line with that. You saw for 5 years, you know, rental vacancies hovered around 7%. We are trending up currently, 7.2, slightly above 2019, but in line with that 5 years before COVID and kind of all of that. So rental vacancy, like this is, you know, if you have built out, you probably have done this, maybe if you're dealing with multifamilies, and you're dealing with investment buyers, you certainly have one of these, whether it's a, you know, a free online tool or you've built out your spreadsheet and you're looking at multifamilies for investors. You know, you're probably factoring in about 7% is kind of always the rule of thumb. Plug in 7% vacancy for the year when you're factoring in what the return is going to be on that investment. Okay, like, okay, what are you going to pay for management? What are you going to factor in for vacancies? You know, what are you factoring in for, you know, if you're in cold weather, what are you factoring in for snow plowing and, you know, different maintenance costs? You know, what are you factoring in as a rule of thumb number? 7% vacancy is kind of that rule of thumb. Maybe in some markets, you're going conservative on that number to give yourself just breathing room, or maybe you have high turnover market and it's going to, you know, and you don't know about the system of turning those units over. And so maybe you go 10%, but 7% is kind of rule of thumb. So, you know, it's gone up. Rental vacancies, there's obviously a higher level of competition on rental units, particularly in those markets where they've, even leaned into overbuilding apartments, so to speak, where you have more inventory, that creates a higher likelihood of some of these rental vacancy units. Okay, so 7% though, generally in a pretty safe spot there. Homeowner vacancy rate. Okay, this number comes in still now below 2019 levels, below all of that time period between 14 and 19. I mean, it was common to see 2%. We're at 1.2% today. Homeowner vacancy rate, very low, near even a historic low, I'd go as far as saying. Home ownership rate coming in at 65.7. Home ownership rate, right now, I'm going to show you if you're not driving, you could take a look. All right, because I'm going to show you a line graph on quarterly home ownership rates, seasonally adjusted from 1999 to 2025. And if you don't look at the numbers on the left, you're going to be like, whoa, home ownership has dropped considerably. But each line on this graph, the percents on the left move up 1%. Okay. So, when you look at this going back to 99, in 2006, we were at 69% home ownership, 2004, 5, and 6. We also gave loans to a whole bunch of people who didn't qualify. Remember, 2004, 2003, 2004, I was 19 years old. And I bought 3 homes, 19 years old, 20 years old, 21. Not because I had money. I had no money. I bought 3 homes on 4 mortgages because I could call up my loan officer and I could say, hey, Big Red. This is what we called them. Because I went to grade school with him, and then he became a loan officer and he's giving out free loans. I said, hey, Big Red, throw me a loan, dude. Byron, there's don't worry about the process, Yeah, you're right. I'll just give you the loan. Don't worry about it. Here it is. That's how it was. And I was pretty dumb, obviously. I was 19. I'm like, ooh, I'm going to go buy a bunch of real estate. Get rich quick, okay? Bitcoin didn't. Sorry for all the Bitcoin holders right now. Saw those numbers this morning. Hope you didn't buy it 120K. I'm sure it'll come back. Everything comes back. But, I didn't know what I was doing. I was making a ton of mistakes. There was a lot of mistakes being made. There was a global meltdown about to ensue. There was loans just being given out like Tic Tacs. And so 69% home ownership, we only reached, I'm going to go the other direction here. We only reached 69% on home ownership rate when anybody could get a loan, multiple loans as easily as you wanted. Ninja, no income, no job. Okay. Like you didn't need anything. Breathing, willing to sign. Here's a loan. And it only went to 69%. So I won't even look at those numbers. Okay. Really, we've been in a range of, pre that bubble, call it 67 in 99, 67% home ownership rate. And now today we're at 65.7. Okay. So the lowest it got during the recovery was 63%. If you go off of, the high of 69 to 63, we're right in the middle. 65.7% home ownership rate, virtually the same as the fourth quarter in 2024. And not statistically different than the rate in the third quarter, which was 65.3. It actually moved up from Q3 to Q4. Okay, it moved up slightly. So home ownership rates is very close to where it's been. Now, in 10 years, maybe some of these doomers are going to be right and nobody's ever going to be able to buy a home again. There is a timeline of progression on wages and other things that need to work its way through the market for homes to be affordable. But we're not looking for 100% home ownership rate. We're not striving for that when we talk about affordability. Not 100% of people want to even own a home. When anybody could get a loan back in 04 and 05, the home ownership rate was only 69%. So not everybody even wants to own a home. Some people want to have the flexibility of being able to pick up and go somewhere else, being able to call the property manager, the landlord, the property owner, and saying, hey, this is broken. Why don't you get on about fixing it? Okay, why don't you deal with it? Being a landlord property owner isn't all that fun at times. The Super Bowl's this weekend, and I'm a big New York Giants fan. And when the Giants played in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, they played them in 2. But that big one, that first one, when the Patriots were undefeated and the Giants beat them in the Super Bowl. Yeah, that Super Bowl, I'm having a big party at my house. Patriots fan up here in Connecticut. Half of the people coming were Patriots fans, and half of the people coming were Giants fans. The state's kind of split down the middle. Giants fans, Patriots fans. Then we have crazy people like Haley who like Philly, I guess. I never knew people from Connecticut that like Philly, but maybe she's a bandwagon fan. I don't know. So we got half the house, Giants and Patriots. There was snow on the ground like there is today. And I got a little quarter keg out there for people who like beer. I've got, other drinks of choice. Might have had some other things of choice going on a long time ago. A lot of good food, a lot of great food. And so we're getting ready for the game, big game, a lot of big fans. And I get a phone call. And one of my tenants, shout out to Yola. I still love Yola. She's great. Says, hey, Byron, the basement's flooded here and it's getting pretty high. The laundry was in the basement. I don't know what to do. I think it's gonna get so high it's gonna come into oh boy. Okay, I'm on my way. Kickoff's like 2 hours. Now I got to drive 20 minutes to the house, figure out what's going on, try to solve the problem, and all I want to do is watch the Super Bowl. Run over there. Thankfully, it was an easy fix. I said, Yola, you see this cord right here? Yeah. Well, what's that cord? That's for the sub pump. It's unplugged. Why'd you unplug it? Oh, I wanted to save on electricity. This plug doesn't even go on your electrical bill. Okay. Keep this plugged in. So then I learned you got to hardwire those things. Okay. But I'm over there for an hour and I'm making sure the water's pumping out and the water's going down and, everything's going to be fine. Right. But some people don't ever want to deal with that as the owner. Why is there a benefit? Why do people that own assets get all the benefits while they're doing that kind of work? Okay. All I wanted to do was watch the Giants. Some people are like, you know what? I don't care if I own an asset. I'd rather make sure that I'm not getting pulled away from my clam dip and I'm watching my New York Giants or I'm watching my New England Patriots, I guess in some cases, right? I wanted to watch the game. I couldn't. I had a responsibility. There's always going to be people that necessarily don't want that responsibility. And so we're not looking for 100% home ownership rate. We're never going to get there. Okay? Just because you want it for somebody. It's like everybody that's getting wrapped up in like what might be going on in another state. And it's all, you see these people online. It's all they talk about is some problem socially happening outside of their neighborhood. And they're so invested in it. They're like emotionally a wreck over it. It's like, you expect to fix 100% of the world's problems or some other country? I mean, you're not going to get 100% of anything. We're not going to get 100% of home ownership rate. Median asking rent for vacant for rent units. This is in alignment with everything else that we're seeing. According to Realtor.com, according to almost every today metric on rents are moving down. So what's following? Median asking rents are moving down. Seen this now for over 2 years. That data, I think it was, we've seen this data from, multiple sources. I've been talking about it for a while. BAMX member, Richard McKinney. Shout out to Richard. He sent me a clip here. Haley, maybe I can send you this clip. I've been hammering this point for multiple years, but this is a great clip on kind of how this rent number that we're looking at right now, how important this is. I'm going to send Haley, if you can play this. I don't think I can play it from mine, right? It's not going to, the volume's not going to show up.
No, you can send it to me.
All right. So this is a clip that BAMX member Richard McKinney DM'd me. By the way, BAMX members, you can DM me on School anytime. I look at 100% of those DMs. Instagram, there's so much crap. It's hard to look at those DMs. But if you're a BAMX member, I'll answer 100% of your DMs. School.com/BAMX. Congrats to all the new BAMX members from yesterday. All right, so play this video. Yeah, go ahead, play that. And share it. So I've been hammering this point about rents, and it's showing up in the data. We see it in the real-time data. This is from John Burns Consulting.
And so I talked about inflation and how bond investors don't like inflation. So if they have conviction inflation is coming in, that's good. If they think it's going to reaccelerate, bad. One of the driving forces for inflation, overall inflation, is what's happening with shelter rents. And so this is a snapshot of how the consumer price index is weighted. And the orange there is rent of shelter. It's 35%. We know that there is a long lag, generally 6 to 12 months, between what's happening in the rental market today and when that will show up in the government data as it relates to shelter, and shelter's a third plus of overall inflation. So I bring that up because our apartment rent index, this is effective new lease, it just ticked negative in December. It's the first time it's ticked negative since 2020. And our single family rental index, again, new lease effective, has been cooling too, to where it's now only 2%. And so if we know today the rental market remains fairly weak, we have high conviction that that will start to show up in the shelter component of CPI 6 to 12 months from now.
And so I've been hammering this for 2 years. Barry Sternlight, who owns more doors than almost anybody, I said this 2 years ago. This was going to happen. This is happening. It has happened. Rental prices have moved down. Rental market is considerably weak, as Richard from John Burns Consulting pointed out, and it's showing up in all the data across the board. Now, one of the driving forces, he said, one of the driving forces of calculation, if you want to be picky with words, one of the driving forces of how inflation is calculated, I would add, is that 35% shelter. And so that's where we really look at it. And it's like, man, we're really operating at about 2% inflation when you use real-time data on this shelter data. I say, because the driving force of inflation is the government printing money. So I'm just kind of playing semantics there with the language. Driving forces of how how the government chooses to calculate, they're making a choice, the Fed really, of how they calculate inflation. They make a choice on what metric they're using, CPI, owner's equivalent rent, a 1980 survey. I don't know many smart people doing, 1980 things. I mean, heck, if you had an iPhone 10 right now, you wouldn't be that smart. As opposed to or an iPhone 9, you'd at least be in the double digits here. So they're choosing to calculate this stuff a certain way. The data is finally going to be catching up because we've been dealing with it for 2 years, and that's going to be an argument against being really worried about inflation this year. The rental vacancies, if I can, there we go. Here we go. Rental vacancies by region. You've got an increase in all regions except for the West. Okay, Northeast, it's increased compared to fourth quarter of 24. The United States has increased 0.3. Midwest is flat. South is increased, and the West is down. And then looking at home ownership rates, country's the same. You got an increase in the Northeast, flat in the Midwest, dip in the South, and dip in the West. All right, there's that U.S. Census Bureau report. Let's look at homeowners and their cash. Remember, you've got a president now saying we want affordability. I'm telling you, the affordability thing is you're going to see all these politicians latch onto it, probably do nothing about it. But latch onto it as a marketing, branding buzzword in this midterm election cycle. So he's done a great job of branding himself as somebody who cares highly about affordability. But yet is saying now, I don't want homeowners to lose any value. Remember, homeowners have confidence. Asset holders have confidence when they can look at the prices and say, yep, I got a ton of equity. Well, the equity's dipping a little bit. U.S. homeowner equity eases slightly in Q4 while seriously underwater rates stay near historic lows. Okay, so be careful of somebody trying to lure you into, things are about to fall apart. There's more underwater homes today than there was last year. We're at historic lows on that metric. Homeowner equity, which has reached all-time highs recently, is easing slightly. It's one of those conditions of over time things coming back to a more normalized state. There's downward pressure on price in high inventory markets. Obviously, the Floridas, the Texases of the world. Okay, so Adam put this together, and here's your trends, okay? U.S. home equity and seriously underwater mortgage trends from quarter 3, 2019 through quarter 4 of 2025. So seriously underwater. So this is loan to value ratio of 125% or more. And you can see back in 2019, you're at about 3.5 million. What are you at today? So today it's ticked up from where we were same time last year. We're at 1.9. So 1.9 versus, and 3.5 in 2019. Nobody was concerned with underwater homes in 2019. The percent underwater in 2019 was 6.5%. There was no conversation in 2019 about being concerned of underwater homes. 0.0% of pontificators, of analysts, of talking heads, of whatever, was talking about underwater homes, and it was 6.5. Today, underwater homes is at 3%, ticking up from the historic lows of being in 2.4, 2.5 range back in the middle of 24. 1.8, under 1.9 million here as we sit here today. Okay, nobody should be talking about underwater homes. There is a segment of the market where that's a natural place for it to sit. Okay, and there's room for it to move up and not be a concern at all. Okay, equity rich back in 2019, you're talking about 26%, 27% equity rich. You're talking about 14 million homes, 14.5 million homes. Okay, today, equity rich While it's dropped off a little bit from the highs of 47%, we're at 44.6%. Okay, we're at 26 versus now 44% today. 28 million homes are equity rich, according to this ATTOM data. All right. So, years of just rapid gains, and it's cooled off a little bit. So homeowner equity is settling into a more sustainable range, and that's not a negative sign for the market, says Rob Barber, CEO at ATTOM. Even with the modest pullback in equity-rich properties and slight uptick in seriously underwater homes, overall equity levels remain remarkably strong given historical standards. Okay. So there you go. That's your update on equity. Obviously, equity is only maximized if it's utilized. It's a good thing to feel great about, a number to point to, maybe an ego thing, bragging rights. You can brag about I was just having this conversation today with somebody this morning. You get people that brag about I got a 2% interest rate. And you're like, oh, cool. Well, where's your house? And it's like, oh, I got the worst house on the worst street in the worst neighborhood. Cool. I'd much rather have an 8% rate on, a $2 million house that's going to grow $1 million over the next 7 years. Okay. Like I'd rather have that than something that's not going to have any appreciation because it's in a terrible, like real estate's a big location thing, right? You can brag about the rate or you can brag about the asset. So you can brag about your equity, but I mean, it doesn't mean anything. And if like we were talking about yesterday, federal government really opened up inventory, what happens to all that equity? It goes away. And that's part of that, theory there that in the cabinet meeting that we looked at yesterday. It's like, I'm not going to do anything that creates a long-term solution to affordability, essentially is what he's saying from the federal government position, that enables homeowners' values to drop. Okay. You can check out the replay on that from yesterday, wherever you listen, Spotify, Apple, or obviously here on YouTube. Okay. Unemployment. This number here this week moved up. So we've got a weekly unemployment ending the week January 31. Initial claims comes in at 231,000. That's an increase of 22,000 from the previous week's unrevised level of 209. 4-week moving average still, very much in line with what we've seen. Very safe in terms of, claiming some stability in job market. 4-week moving average is 212,000. That's got to get up over 250,000 for it to force the Fed's hand before, obviously, a Warsh takeover, and we see what happens then. But the Fed is, as Poly Market predicts, as CME predicts, is not making any move with this job market over the next 2 meetings. And you'd have to get the 4-week moving average up over 250,000, I think, to force the hand, or close to it at least, or signs that that's where it's heading. This is one data point. A 4-week moving average comes in at 212,000. You're going to have to stack a few weeks at the very least that look like, the upward trend, which we've seen, and then bounce right back in the past. An upward trend of weekly unemployment would have to gain some consistency to force the hand. We did see a 10-year here today, starting the day, lower than we've seen, lower than yesterday, and lower than I think we've seen in the last 5 days. Let's take a look. 4.23. Yeah, this is on the lower end of the last 5 days. Certainly from the last 3 days, this is trending down. So 10-year moving down here over the last 24, 4.23 to start the day. 30-year fixed rates yesterday in line with where they were the day prior, 6.2 on the Mortgage News Daily Read. All right, there you go. That's your hot sheet here for today. For those of you that missed BAM Pro Bowl, if you're a BAMX member, super easy. Replays in BAMX, Ailey? Yeah. Replays in BAMX. You can go watch it. If you signed up for BAM Pro Bowl, you get access to the replay. If you didn't sign up and you're not in BAMX, I don't know what to tell you. I think we gave you a heads up for a while there. Thanks for all of you guys that showed up live. That was great time to spend with you. Jump into school. We're leaving it open from the BAM Pro Bowl pack. There's an offer here of 7-day free trial. Go to school.com/BAMX. I'll see you in there. BAMX members, DM me anytime. We'll have a show tomorrow. We'll have a hot sheet tomorrow. All right. Till then, toodaloo.